We have always heard that, for example, such and such country is this much in debt, and that other country is that much in debt. What does that mean? Why are these countries in debt? Currently, if we examine the countries of the world, we see that they have more than $100 trillion in debt, of which more than $36 trillion is United States debt. In other words, the United States is the most indebted country in the world. The problem with countries like the United States that have so much debt is that their income is less than their debt. What does that mean? It means they are earning less and are on the verge of bankruptcy. It does not work like that. For example, the United States, facing $36 trillion in debt, has a gross domestic product, GDP of $25 trillion, which means its annual income is much less than its debt, and its debt-to-income ratio is 120. If you calculate it in terms of how much GDP there is compared to debt, Japan becomes the most indebted country in the world. Japan's GDP is about $4.2 trillion, and in contrast, it has more than $9 trillion in debt. That means if we calculate by this ratio, Japan is the most indebted country in the world. This high percentage of debt is seen in the only developed country, Japan, that we observe. Because if we look at the countries that have such ratios, we have to consider Venezuela, Sudan, Eritrea, and Lebanon, the poor and third world countries that do not have much income. Yet Japan, despite having this very powerful economy, has ended up in this rank among the world's indebted countries. They inevitably incur so much debt year after year. Why? Because Japan and the United States are the most indebted countries in the world. Here, debt means that we borrow money for government projects. And you should know that these countries are always repaying their debt, but at the same time are borrowing more money. For a country that is growing, usually this debt goes higher and higher. For example, the United States pays $500 billion of its debt every year. In contrast, Japan pays $1 trillion of its debt per year, which is only 1/4 of its total income and debt. And then the debt comes back in place, not decreasing. When a government cannot pay its debt on time, it goes to borrow money, and the debt becomes restructured. That is, it is rolled over. And on the other hand, its debt increases because all this debt carries interest. That is why the debts of countries keep rising. Japan tries to keep it from rising too high by paying only 1/4 of its GDP. Now you might ask, why are the affluent countries so indebted? It is because most of these are credits. For example, India wants to export its products to Japan, so I give Japan $5 billion in credit here. It is not a debt nor a receivable, only Indian and Japanese merchants can use this credit. And when a certain amount goes from India to Japan, Japan becomes indebted to India, and vice versa. The more reputable you are, and the more timely you pay your debts, the higher your credit becomes, and eventually you become more indebted. But a country like Nigeria, in some periods, has borrowed money but has not been able to pay on time. So its credit has fallen and is almost zero. It is true that it no longer takes on more debt, but its economy has weakened and moves slowly. Of course, domestic debt can also be incurred. Governments that need money borrow from their own people. They create bonds and sell them to the people, and eventually, people get their money back with interest. Alongside these credits and borrowings, there are international banks that lend money to governments, one of the most important being the International Monetary Fund, IMF, or the bank, and others, which very easily lend money to rich and creditworthy countries. But if they want to lend money to other countries, they impose conditions and requirements. For example, they say, pass such and such law, and we will give you a loan, or abolish such and such law, and we will give you a loan. And usually the countries that are in trouble are forced to implement those demands. For example, one of the most unreliable countries in the world, Argentina, has so far borrowed from the IMF 22 times and taken loans, and has hardly repaid any of them. Argentina is currently indebted to this fund by only $330 billion. As for its other debts, well, nothing. Now, why is the United States so indebted a country with such economic power and influence all over the world? Why is it the most indebted country in the world in terms of amount? Although we said that Japan is first in percentage terms, there are two reasons that the United States has reached this point. One is the recession in 2008, and the other is the coronavirus, which forced the United States, in both cases, to print dollars and give financial aid to that people, and alongside that, had not done these things during the 2008 recession, and after the corona epidemic. Its economy would have fallen so much that something like the Great Depression of 1930 would have occurred. That is, the country would have been completely paralyzed. This debt was manageable and yielded good results, but it is of the good kind. However, we have a bad kind of debt. For example, Greece, one of the members of the European Union today, its currency is the euro. Greece, when it joined the European Union, in order to bring itself to the level of those countries, did not start by building up, but by taking loans. And the wealthy euro in countries such as England, Germany, and France lent hundreds of billions of euros to Greece, so that it could reach the level of Western Europe. But Greece was not capable of that. They took the money, wasted it, and did not achieve any development. They only left behind a pile of heavy debt for themselves. This caused Greece's economy to be completely paralyzed, and investors no longer dared to invest their money in this country. What worsened Greece's situation was its low population and very high unemployment. This situation further harmed Greece. Those who were doing well and had high educational qualifications emigrated to Western Europe, the United States, Australia, etc. And this made Greece's situation even more dismal. Today, it is a country that is completely overburdened with debt and also has unemployment problems. If a tourist went to this country, you should compare it, for example, with Paraguay. An interesting example is that one country, during the 2008 recession, did not let its economy collapse: China. China borrowed a lot of money from domestic and international banks and invested in the development of high-speed rail. This caused China's economy to come out of the 2008 recession in good shape. It created a lot of jobs, and by doing so, connected the whole country with high-speed rail. With one stone, it hit several targets. First, it prevented the collapse of the country's economy. Second, it prevented unemployment from spreading. And third, it installed high-speed rail throughout the country. And they built more than 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail in China. Is the most in the world. That is, China has more high-speed rail than any other country in the world. This is a valuable debt, and with that money, it is an investment with value, because it is a technology that will help China's economy grow for decades. But there is another example of debt that is very ruthless, the debt that France imposed on Haiti. In 1825, when Haiti became independent from France, France refused to grant it independence. It told the new government, if you want to be independent, You must give us 90 million francs, an amount that is equivalent to $30 billion today. That was a lot of money, especially in 1825. Just imagine what kind of money that was. The Haitian government, which was very optimistic, accepted and said, "Okay," and went under the burden of this heavy debt to the French. In a way, had it not become independent, it would have been much to their benefit. Haiti struggled for the sake of paying this debt, exhausting its entire nation and country, until it managed to clear this debt after 120 years. But Haiti never achieved anything else afterward. This is how they granted its independence. It means that this country did not start from solid ground. It started from the bottom of a swamp and then climbed up. That is why it has still not been able to reach the level of others. Many people think that any country that gets into debt will fall into utter misery. But there is debt, and then there is debt, the kind of debt we mentioned that is based on credit and financial engineering and gives rise to economic growth and development. But debt like Haiti's to France or Greece's to the European Union is something that plunges countries into misery. This was the answer to one of your questions. Which countries are the most indebted in the world and why? Some of the developed countries are also among the most indebted. I hope I have answered your questions.